It is early July 2025, and I thought I would give you a quick market update. But first, I want to give you some history and some context. So, if you've been paying attention to the real estate market over the last decade or so, then you probably remember that about 10 years ago, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, we were sort of recovering from the housing market bubble that had burst in 2007, 8, and 9. And that was a situation where housing values really plummeted. They dropped in a lot of places around the country, not everywhere, but a lot of places around the country. And we were working on recovering that value and getting people up to a place where they started to have more equity in their houses, and things were clicking along pretty well by about 2015. So 2015, 16, 17, right in there, pretty normal years while we're still kind of accumulating some equity. And so this history lesson, that to give you context for today's market, starts in about 2018. So this is, I should say, for the Utah market, pretty much overall. We have an MLS that covers most of our market. We have a few smaller MLSs in specific areas, Washington County, Park City area, Summit County, and Iron County. But mostly, our MLS covers pretty much the whole state. So looking back to early July of 2018, we had a really normal, quote unquote normal, for that time of about 8,500 active properties, active units on the market ready to be sold. And we had about 7,000 active buyers who were under contract working toward closing. So it was pretty balanced. Just about maybe 1,500 more active sellers than there were active buyers. So pretty balanced market. So then in about 2019, we're looking at almost the same proportion. We've got a few higher by way of active listings. We're closer to about 9,500, and we have about 7,000 active buyers. So pretty close, pretty normal for that period of time. Well, then as you all remember, in March of 2020, COVID hit. That took the bottom out of the market pretty much from about March to May when we were experiencing the shutdown. So the bottom kind of falls out of the real estate market, and then interest rates fell. I hope you refinanced or bought a property sometime between May of 2020 to about May of 2022 because interest rates were really, really low. And that was like an extra powerful engine in the property market, the real estate market. So what happened is we sort of by July of 2020, when things really started to ramp up, our buyer and seller activity swapped. So now we had only about 6,000 active properties on the market, and we had about 7,500 active buyers under contract. So our proportions had changed. And that's because every time a house came on the market, it got absorbed really quickly. So that kind of market activity with low interest rates brought in lots of buyers, and it just absorbed those normal sellers on the market at a quicker pace. So by 2021, things had gotten even more off kilter in terms of buyer and seller activity. So now we've got maybe 3,000 active sellers on the market compared to about 8,000 active buyers. So we just have houses coming on the market, getting under contract very, very quickly, and buyers working toward closing at about 2.5 times the pace of new listings coming on the market. So that was 2021. And then in 2022, interest rates went up in May. All of a sudden, we, instead of having 2 and 3% interest rates, we went up to 6, 7, and 8% interest rates in May of 2022. So by July of 2022, there were all of these buyers poised to buy, but their interest rates that they had been counting on were no longer available, and so buyers started leaving the market, which meant listings stayed on the market longer and longer. So at that time, July of 2022, we had about 8,000 listings, about 6,000 buyers. So the proportion had gone back to more of a normal proportion. But interest rates continued to be high. And then in 2023, what ended up happening is so many more buyers were not able to close on houses. So in 2022, right when the interest rates had started going up, I told you we had, around 6,000 or 7,000 buyers under contract. Well, in July of 2023, we were down to about 4,000 buyers under contract. Still had about 8,000 listings, so we were about half and half in terms of active buyers and so we were about half and half in terms of active sellers and active buyers on the market, about 8,000 to 4,000. Well, that proportion has kind of remained the same. We had in 2024 right around that 4,000 to 5,000 mark in active buyers, but our listings continued to accumulate. So by July of 2024, we had about 10,000 active listings on the market. And now, July of 2025, we've got over 13,000 active listings on the market, but still around 5,000 buyers on the market. So we have had about the same number of buyers for the last 3 years, 23, 24, and 25. But we have more and more listings coming on the market, which means we have more and more sellers willing to say goodbye to those purchased or refinanced rates in the 2 and 3s, letting those properties be sold and adopting new higher interest rates. But we just have still the same number of buyers. So if you are a buyer right now, you are in a great position because historically, we haven't had this proportion of sellers to buyers for a really long time. Probably not since maybe 2013, 2014. And so we've got, because in about 2018, we had still about 8,000 buyers on the market. So now we have many fewer than that. So, and that was kind of our last normal year. So what I would say is if you are a seller, then understand the numbers. Understand that we have the same number of buyers as we have had for the last 3 years, but we have lots more listings for them to choose from. And so that extra inventory is diluting buyer demand. So instead of one property getting maybe 5 showings a week, I think it's probably down to around 2 right now instead of that. Same number of buyers, more listings, diluting the demand. That's going to decrease showings and it's going to decrease offers. In general, there are going to be price points and really popular neighborhoods where that won't hold true, but just generally there are more listings for buyers to look at. So if you're a seller, hunker down, be prepared to negotiate, be prepared to be competitive with other properties that are similar to yours. And if you're a buyer, be prepared to get out there and find a property that's going to work for you and negotiate and find a deal. There are deals to be had right now in the Salt Lake and Utah market if you are a buyer. So this is a great time to jump in. Also, we've kind of touched on the fact that it's interest rates that are driving the buyer activity in the market. And right now we see that interest rates for conventional 30-year financing are maybe around 6.25% to 6.5%, which isn't bad. Back in May of 2022, like I said, we were in the 7s and low 8s. So that has really improved. And if they do continue to go down, which they have for the last, 2, 3, 4 weeks, they've stabilized and come down just a tiny bit to where we are now. If that continues to happen, more buyers will come into the market. We'll have more people being able to absorb this inventory, and then that will create fewer deals going forward. Is that going to happen? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen with interest rates. There's a lot of speculation, but we won't know until it happens, and then we'll be able to look back and say, this is why it happened. Until then, we know what's happening right now in the market today. So if today is a good time for you to buy a house, then do it. If today the circumstances that we're in is not a good time, then it's not your right time, and you wait until it is your right time. But if circumstances are good for you right now, maybe you have a lease expiring, maybe you need a bigger home, maybe you need a smaller home, whatever it is, this is a good time to be a buyer, and it is a good time to be a seller if you can be patient and realistic. I know I've been talking a lot about how interest rates drive the real estate market, and they really do. They were peaking out in May of 2022 and through 2022 around 7, even maybe in the low 8s percent for mortgage interest rates. Today, they're closer to about 6.25, 6.5 for the 30-year conventional rate. If you're going FHA or VA, we're looking at closer to 5 and 7/8, which is great. We love seeing rates in the 5s. That means that rates are pretty affordable right now if you're a buyer comparatively. So if this is the right time for you to purchase a home, get in there and do it, because right now there are deals to be had. There's lots of inventory for you to look at, lots of houses and properties for you to consider, decent interest rates. So get in there and do it. Now, what may happen if rates continue to kind of trend downward like they have been over the last month or so, then more and more buyers will be compelled to come into the market, which will be less attractive for buyers, because the more buyers there are, the more buyer competition, the more prices for homes will stabilize or even go up a little bit. So that would be a great situation for sellers. It'd be a little bit harder for buyers, even though rates went down a little bit. So this is a good moment. Coming into the summer months, I think we'll probably stabilize right here for a little while, but who knows? If somebody tells you they know what's going to happen with interest rates, then try to get more information, because I would like their phone number. I would like to know what's going to happen with interest rates. The fact is, nobody really knows. Once it happens, then we can look back and say, oh, these are the factors that went into why we have the interest rates we have. But right now, the question really is, does today's market work for you? And if it does, then this is a good time to get in. If today's market doesn't work for you, then wait. No pressure. There's a lot of houses to get through, and there's going to be something for you when you're ready. If you're a seller, hunker down, be patient, be realistic with what's happening in our market. These are forces that are beyond our control as individuals, but that we can still show up and do our best in. So let me know if you have any questions. I'm Marilee Rowley. I'm principal broker of Selling Salt Lake, and this has been Real Estate Real Talk.